podcast is simply watching three teachers discussing a paper entitled Tapping into Argumentation, Developments in the Application of Toulmin's Argument Pattern for Studying Science Discourse. It's a paper written by Sybil O'Durman, Shirley Simon and Jonathan Osman of King's College. This study was supported by the UK Economic and Social Research Council.
What do you think it means, Neil?
From reading the paper, I think it's more about organising a genuine debate, and you put forward claims and counterclaims with supporting evidence and being prepared to offer rebuttal to the evidence that's presented to you. So almost more akin to the kind of thing you might see in Crown Court or a jury.
It should be, sort of debating skills in a way, really, isn't it?
The idea that pupils have to think of the argument and the counter-argument. So they've got to provide evidence to support or data to support their claims. I don't think we do enough of that, and I don't do enough to encourage rebuttal. So I like the basic premise of the paper.
I thought argumentation meant the skill of presenting an argument, but I might be wrong there.
The main cornerstones of argumentation, such as making a claim, having some kind of data to support it, having the warrants behind it, looking at the idea of rebuttal and counterclaim, and supporting the counterclaim. So I thought these are actually quite powerful tools, and making people think about that as opposed to just agreement, disagreement. And in a sense, when I reflected on this afterwards, Janette made me think about this morning. This ties in quite nicely with the Bono's idea of developing reasoning skills, because the Bono would argue that you should look at all sides of the argument.
Yeah.
You see the other side, other person's point of view before you carry on.
Well, all I meant about the statement was, surely, if folk find it a bit difficult to understand what I meant by argumentation and discourse, that the lost point of the paper, that you really... I mean, people like Feynman, for example, can explain very simple, very, very difficult things in simple language, even people like me can understand. And if I think that the language that the writer used, while it has to be reasonably precise as opposed to communicate properly, they could put it in a clearer way.
So why do you think we do need to encourage argumentation in science classrooms?
It's part of the analytical skills that children need. When faced with perhaps the discussions between creationists and people that follow the sort of evolutionary theory, I think children should be aware of the tools that folk are using to present their arguments, and also to be able to analyse what's being said in order to...
Well, how's that different to what we do in school in discussion then?
Because discussion doesn't necessarily require data to support the argument and doesn't require rebuttal. The upshot of the paper was that by encouraging argumentation, you developed pupils' reasoning skills through discourse, and they get a chance to explain and justify their thinking. That was my interpretation as a basic.
Yeah, I thought that the whole gist of the paper was looking at a tool that's used for analysing the effectiveness of teaching arguments in the middle school. And I thought that was just, how valid is this TAPS technique at seeing how much arguments improve.
For me, sort of being a primary teacher, the fact that this was sort of aiming, sort of early secondary stages, it raised the questions with me about developing the skills, engaging in dialogue, and
The children would. What about the teachers?
Teachers as well.
Well, that's what I suggested. I don't think I do enough of this, because it did make me think about how you approached what we even call discussion and debate. And I think this would be a good set of tools to help develop the skills of debate in a classroom. And in terms of Curriculum for Excellence, the science outcomes, we've got this whole topic now called topical science. So you can look at a whole raft of issues, new technologies, the ethics of science, and if we could build this in, not necessarily as an assessment, but if the teachers could start thinking about the skills they want to develop, this could be a useful tool. So I agree with what you're saying, but I think you can take that as an analytical tool and a way of making me think about my own teaching at the same time.
Yeah.
One of the good things I think it does, it encourages higher order thinking, because it will develop, and the authors claim it develops reasoning skills, and we're encouraged to introduce more higher order thinking skills in our teaching. I also think that we be paying lip service to it, but it also helps us address things like the purposes of curriculum for excellence in terms of the idea of the confident individual. So I see I quite enjoyed reading the paper, and it's made me think about my own practice. Maybe that's the purpose of the paper.